If you were to fill a room with a bunch of people who had attempted and failed to quit smoking on their own, maybe several times, you'd find that probably a majority of them believe the reason is because they're addicted to nicotine, or they find the withdrawal from nicotine too uncomfortable to tolerate. What if I told you that that is a myth? Well, you probably wouldn't believe me because you, like most of us, have been brainwashed by the medical community and the drug companies that are selling nicotine replacement that nicotine is more addictive than cocaine, or that it's the most highly addictive substance, and that the primary reason why people have trouble quitting smoking is because of nicotine dependence. Well, I can tell you that my experience as a hypnotist over around 10 years and the hundreds of clients I've helped to quit smoking through hypnosis, I can tell you that that's absolutely not true. In fact, clinically, that's BS. Now, here's why. There's very little difference in the difficulty that my clients have had in quitting smoking, whether they smoked for 30 years or 5 years. There's very little difference in the challenge they experience, whether they smoked a pack or two a day or 5 or 10 cigarettes a day. Now, chemically or medically, that would be a surprise. And it's interesting that over the years, when I've spoken to physicians and I've lectured to them about smoking cessation and how it's important for them to expand their awareness beyond looking at the chemical physical model, that nicotine withdrawal is actually mostly mythical. And it's really a misunderstanding of 3 dietary factors that when they're controlled for or eliminated, there are very little, if any, physical problems from quitting smoking. And many of my clients over the years quit smoking after 1 or 2 sessions, even if they've smoked for 30 years, a pack or 2 packs a day, and have virtually no withdrawal symptoms. Now, how is this possible with that amount of nicotine and that amount of chemical dependency? That's because quitting smoking is primarily a mental phenomenon. It's an emotionally compulsive habit that needs to be dealt with at the mental level. So, what are these 3 factors that lead to what we think of as nicotine withdrawal? Well, the first is caffeine overdose. The second is hypoglycemia or low blood sugar. And the third is dehydration. So let's take these one at a time. Now, typically, most smokers drink coffee. It's rare that you find someone who smokes a pack a day drinking green tea or no caffeine. Usually, smokers drink a lot more caffeine on a daily basis than non-smokers, and there's a good reason for this. The chemical breakdown of nicotine, which takes about 3 days from the last cigarette to completely leave the bloodstream. Only 72 hours after quitting smoking, the body is completely free of nicotine, and most of it's gone in 48 hours. So that process has an effect on caffeine, which means when nicotine is present, caffeine breakdown is actually about twice as fast as it would be for someone with no nicotine. So, even though we focus on the nicotine in the bloodstream, we don't think about the caffeine. So let's just say a non-smoker needs 2 cups of coffee in a given day to have a certain function level or a certain energy level. On average, someone who smokes a pack a day is going to need 4 cups of coffee, or 2 double the size cups of coffee. They're going to need twice as much caffeine as a non-smoker. That's because when nicotine is in the system, the breakdown of caffeine effectively happens in half the time. So what happens when someone quits smoking and they're still consuming the same 4 cups of coffee? Suddenly they have an overdose of caffeine. And what are those symptoms? Rapid heart rate, shortness of breath, inability to sleep. Sounds kind of like nicotine withdrawal, doesn't it? Now, what about hypoglycemia? Low blood sugar. A typical smoker has for breakfast coffee and a few cigarettes. So when they quit smoking and they don't add breakfast, what happens is their blood sugar drops. Because what happens is when we have a cigarette, it causes our adrenaline response to kick in, a stress response. It causes the mobilization of blood fat or triglycerides as well as blood sugar. So blood sugar and fat go up, giving us the illusion of energy, and it creates a wakeful state. Well, when you remove that and you're not bringing in the necessary source of fuel, food, right, then there's a blood sugar crash. A cigarette causes blood sugar to go up, as does caffeine, but without it, the blood sugar dips. And what are the symptoms of a blood sugar dip? Irritability, listlessness, inability to focus, maybe sometimes the shakes. That's hypoglycemia, but it sounds a lot like nicotine withdrawal. Now, the third one is dehydration. Smokers are chronically dehydrated for a couple reasons. One, that they're breathing in hot, dry air and exhaling from the lungs moist, hot air. So they're constantly dehydrating through the breathing process, and they're also in an ongoing futile attempt to detoxify, so their urinary output is typically higher, especially if they're consuming more caffeine than they should be, because caffeine is a diuretic, causing them to urinate more. So because smokers tend to consume more caffeinated beverages than non-caffeinated compared to a non-smoker, they're consuming less water and eliminating more water, so they're dehydrated. Now, even though you can have symptoms of dehydration, such as low energy and fatigue, that can be masked by the stimulatory effect of the nicotine. So, and of course, not just the nicotine, but the cortisol, which is and the adrenaline, which are the stress hormones that are triggered by the nicotine. So, when the blood sugar goes up, the stress hormones go up, triglycerides increase, there's a feeling of energy which overcompensates for the ongoing listlessness that would be there for anyone who's dehydrated. So, what I'm telling you is that when you control for the caffeine overdose, the hypoglycemia, and the dehydration, in other words, cut the caffeine intake in half upon the last cigarette. When that happens, you cut the caffeine in half. You make sure you avoid skipping meals, and you have breakfast so the blood sugar stays stable, and drink plenty of water. In most cases, there are zero physical withdrawal symptoms of nicotine. Now, one more time, just to clarify how people brainwash themselves and confirm the lie that nicotine withdrawal is difficult. So imagine a smoker who smoked a pack a day for a while, and he quit smoking. He suddenly finds he has the heart palpitations, the shortness of breath, the irritability, the shakes, the difficulty sleeping, maybe foggy-headedness. Now remember, these are the classic symptoms of nicotine withdrawal, and they also are the symptoms of the caffeine overdose, the hypoglycemia, and the dehydration. He says, I knew it. I'm having nicotine withdrawal. And he struggles as much as he can to get through a day, 2 days, but it's too much for him. So he says, forget it. I can't do it. He picks up a cigarette, smokes. What happens? Suddenly, blood sugar goes up. Energy levels go up. Caffeine breakdown normalizes for a smoker. And suddenly, he feels better. And as he continues to smoke again, he feels a cessation of all of those uncomfortable feelings. Now, he still has poor dietary habits, but they're being covered up by the nicotine. And then he says, I knew it. I knew it was nicotine withdrawal. Don't believe the lie. It's not about nicotine. When you take care of your diet in those areas that I mentioned, and most importantly, use hypnosis to change the subconscious belief that you need to smoke, suddenly the compulsion is gone. The tendency to even think about smoking fades away, and then you've quit smoking once and for all. So smoking is not about nicotine. It's about emotional compulsion. And when you deal with that, the problem is solved.